What's up, Patreon? A lot of you guys have asked lately for videos on tactics. We're going to do a little bit of that, but tactics is best taught face to face, where I can see you, you can see me, and we can reach out and touch each other because it conveys a lot better that way. But in light of the interest in tactics, I was listening to a podcast this morning while I was out here in the barn bunker office boardroom logging camp, and we call this a multi-use structure. I was listening to a podcast with Tim Ferriss, who is one of my favorite podcasters, interviewers, authors. Great guy. Most people would lump him into the realm of self-help. Yeah, there's that, but man, entrepreneurship, the 4-hour work week is required reading to work with me. Like in a professional capacity, you must read and understand the 4-hour work week, written by Timothy Ferriss, 2 R's, 2 S's. Timothy Ferriss. So I was listening to his podcast and I saw that he had an interview with Tim Kennedy, American Special Forces badass. And I'm like, let me listen to this. There's probably some nuggets in here. I would enjoy this. And I did. It was very good. But at one point, they're sitting in this room in Austin, Texas. You know, there's a small production crew there, and Tim Kennedy and Tim Ferriss. And the conversation comes up of, he said, you know, what would you do if bad guys came through this door right now? And he said, well, the first thing I would do. And he gets into this discussion about how you want to keep the blood in the good people and get the blood out of the bad people. And I thought that was a very succinct way of explaining basically warfare, right? The bad people, you want all their blood to leak out. And the good people, you want all their blood to stay inside their body. Those are the two extremes. And depending on the situation and who you are and what the battlefield looks like, will dictate how much in either direction that goes, right? But I thought that was very succinct, so I wanted to share that with you all, and I would encourage you to listen to that podcast. But at one point he goes, yeah, and I got a Glock 43 here with frangible hollow points, and I've got some tourniquets here, and then I've got a blowout kit, and I've got my IFAK, and then I've got my backpack. And you could kind of hear almost an audible gasp of these people in Austin, Texas, like, oh, this guy's real. He's carrying the equipment that he talks about. So there's definitely a takeaway there for y'all is, don't just be the person who talks about it. Be the person who does it, right? Deeds, not words. Facta non verba. And Tim Kennedy basically makes the comment that, hey, man, if everybody in this room took a round right now, I could deal with it. I have that capability on me right now. That's awesome. That's especially as a guy who's been out here in the barn packing IFAKs, like, while listening to this, I thought that was great. But they then get into a discussion about situational awareness and how Kennedy and his buddy play a game when they go out to eat, how they look around the restaurant. And I've played this game with lots of people, and it's fun. And I've been at various points on the spectrum here of, he said, you know, we look for the guys with the grunt style shirts and affliction shirts and the come and take it, Molon Labe, don't tread on me stuff. And understand, this is my home. This is my bunker. When I go out in the world, I don't have any of that crap on me. I don't. Because of this very game. They say, you know, we look for the people that have, that are all tatted up and they've got their Don't Tread on Me shirt, and they've got, you know, big stickers, NRA or GOA stickers on their jacked up trucks. And then we start looking for bulges. You know, he said, yeah, that guy's definitely appendix carrying. There's no way that, he's not Dirk Diggler. And that guy's got a bulge on his waist. And look at these two. They're kind of uncomfortable with each other and what's going on. They play this game. And he incorporates all of this into a discussion about situational awareness. And a point that he makes, and it's a very good point. And again, if you want more information on this, a very good discussion on the subject, John Mosby's Clandestine Carry Pistol has a very good discussion on this as well. He says, you have to, this is Kennedy talking and I'm paraphrasing. He says, you have to understand the situational norms. What's your baseline? Okay? What's your baseline? Because once you understand what your baseline is, you can understand where are the outlying factors here. Who's acting weird? And then when you can start to pick out who's acting weird in the context of the situation you're in, you can form a broader picture about the threat that they represent to you. You know, is that woman acting weird because she's emotionally distressed because this guy's about to break up with her while you're sitting in this restaurant? Or is she acting weird because she's got a suicide vest on? That matters, right? Because that's either a, yeah, have a nice life, whatever, or a, right, bang, 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 get the blood out of the bad guys. You know, and that's an extreme scenario, but I oftentimes use extremes to illustrate the point. So you have to establish what the baseline is, normalcy. Now, here's the dichotomy, which, by the way, was one of my favorite words before I even knew who Jocko Willink was. So if I ever meet the man face to face, when I meet the man face to face, I'm going to let him know, bro, you stole my word. Quit trying to sound smart. That's a bear word. You're welcome. Here's the deal. The dichotomy between situational awareness and normalcy bias. You need to know what's normal, but you run the risk of normalcy bias where everything's so normal that it doesn't register anymore. And so where's the balance? I was recently on the phone with a client where we were talking about establishing around the perimeter of their property a pathway, at least to walk on, ideally to move a vehicle on, all the way around the perimeter of their property. A, it creates a natural break. Predators of the two-legged and the four-legged kind don't like crossing through the open. B, you can move along it. And C, because you can move along it, you get a higher pride of ownership because you're using it, you're experiencing it. It's like a park-like setting. And you can also, when you're walking it, establish a baseline for normalcy. For example, I was out rucking the other morning and I found a big cat print, about yay big cat print in the wet dirt. Okay, now we got a big cat. That wasn't there yesterday. I know this because I ruck this property 5-6 days a week. Right now I'm not because I'm dealing with potentially early onset flat foot, which is a term I just made up, but my arch of my left foot doesn't love me right now. So also breaking in a new pair of boots for rucking, so that's part of what's going on here as well. Different story for a different time. But point being, I'm observing intimate parts of my property on the daily, so I know what's out of place. If you don't make good observations regularly, you run the risk of falling into a normalcy bias where you just assume that everything's good to go. Oh yeah, I was back there a couple weeks ago, everything's good to go. Man, maybe a big cat moved in back there and it's going to eat your goats. Maybe an assault force is positioning on your back 40. Who knows, right? You don't want to get comfortable. You also don't want to get so situationally aware. This is kind of the other end of the spectrum. And you see it, I see it often. There's a lot of guys that do this. You can watch them as they move about, and they're very staccato in their movements. Like everything is, Mosby relates stories in his book, and I've seen this too, of watching people fight over who's going to sit with their back to the wall so they can see the entrance. Hey, if we're both switched on and we're both carrying, I don't care. Now we've got complementing fields of fire, right? I'll literally cover your back, you literally cover mine. Good to go. Although I prefer to be able to see the entrances and the exits, but I'm not going to make a fool of myself out in public if I can't sit somewhere where that's not an option, right? And part of, free association, who do you hang out with? The people I tend to hang out with, I'm not worried if I'm not the guy covering the exit, because I know that, a fine example of this is I recently went to lunch with a client and my business partner. You might know him. He of the Viking Preparedness, Pastor Joe. I don't think he minded that I could see the entrance, and I definitely didn't mind that he could see the exit. Not an issue. Not an issue. So if you're associating with competent people and you have confidence in their abilities, you don't have to be a tactical douchebag all the time. And you don't need to go overboard by printing your situational awareness out there into the world. So balance kind of normalcy, bias, blase, everything's fine, and be super ultra tactical all the time. chill, bro. Chill. And so there's definitely a sweet spot, and the sweet spot, it kind of falls into the gray man area, which again, I'm not a consummate expert at because bear, right? Bear. I kind of stick out. Right? But middle ground is where the gray man exists. Just like the middle ground between normalcy bias, blase blah, and super switched on, ultra tactical, high speed, situational awareness, man, normal ground. Now you can be keyed over here, pegged over here on sensory input, dare I say almost overload of assessing threats, getting the lay of the land, establishing the biometrics and the aesthetics of the situation that you're in. And that person's cool, that person's not cool. I'm not really sure about them yet. Need more context on that. You can be doing all that behind the scenes of a normal, everyday person. So just watch that. And I thought that that was a conversation worth having, give you something to think about regarding the tactics that everybody wants to discuss. And a lot of this relates to EDC and gray man, right? Operating in a potentially hostile environment, or NPE, non-permissive environment, as they say, where you're not going to be running around with one of these and one of these, right? Or it's just you and your pistol. You can't be, super ultra tactical guy all the time. And you can't walk around, and believe me, I understand this completely. Somebody recently asked about command presence. Yeah, absolutely. I could switch it on. I mean, I can go there if I need to. If you're doing that constantly when you're out in the world, A, you're probably trying to compensate for something, and B, it's a red flag to everybody who knows what they're doing. They can see you from a mile away. This guy, the affliction t-shirt and the tats and the hat and the operator shades, and this guy's definitely carrying a weapon. He's definitely going to be, is he a good guy or a bad guy, right? You're now on the radar. In the mission profile for Florida, the Florida missions and the upcoming Nebraska mission, one of the first things it says in the mission profile is, this is a mission. It will be treated as such. There will be no tactical douchebaggery. And I mean it, right? Because we're going into neighborhoods. We're operating in a potentially hostile, non-permissive environment. Already the fact that we are there is going to cause a ripple in the wave of normalcy in the environment that we're operating in. We don't want to accentuate that by being super ultra switched on. Yeah, man, scan, look close, look out. Yeah, we're doing all of that, but we're not like, roar. Okay? So, yeah, situational awareness and normalcy bias. There is a sweet spot. I would encourage you to find it and practice it. And just a little thought piece for you. I would also encourage you to read that Mosby book. It's really a good book. One of y'all sent it to me. I need to go back to my email and find out who it was and thank you personally, but thank you. And that podcast, the Tim Ferriss Show with Tim Kennedy, really good podcast. And it got me thinking about this for y'all, that there's maybe a conversation worth having, that there's a sweet spot there. You don't want to be an ignoramus. You do not want to be walking around with your head in the sand. I know that doesn't make any sense, but, with your blinders on, especially just doing this all the time. You don't want to be doing that. But you also can't be, roar, like, bro, this is daycare. I'm just here to pick up my kid, not, where is she? She's 3'10". She weighs 42.7 pounds. She's blah, 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 blah. She was wearing a pink shirt this morning with blue socks. Like, chill, bro. She's back in the play area with Play-Doh. She'll be here in a minute. Take it down a notch. Okay? So there is a sweet spot. And where you really win the battle here is looking like the idiot with their phone stuck in their face all the time, but being almost all the way pegged. You don't want to hit sensory overload, but almost all the way pegged where you're constantly taking in information and assessing and reassessing and reevaluating and establishing benchmarks and baselines and picking and choosing all these pieces of data and compiling them into a threat assessment, ongoing threat assessment as you're operating in the environment. That's the sweet spot. That's really where you want to be, because now you're not keying anybody else's radar. You're not flipping their switches going, that guy could be a problem. We need to watch that guy. You're just everybody else out here. But in here, you're switched on. Shalom, y'all.